Ready? Peace, love, my human brothers and sisters. How you doing out there? I hope you're all keeping safe and everything is okay with you out there. Before I go on, I'd like to say, look after your families. You know, I know we've got the social distance thing going on now because of COVID-19, the coronavirus. But look after your fellow brothers and sisters. Look after the ones who are close to you, and especially check on the older ones. You know, the elderly ones of the community at this time, and some of them can't go out, they can't go and do their shopping, and they've got nobody to look out for them. So if you can, phone them, go and visit them. Even if you go and visit them, you leave the shopping in the front of the door. I think they'll appreciate that. Anyway, we're here to talk about the Covent Garden incident in Jamaica. It's just a brief synopsis about my opinion. I posted up a post on Facebook. It was about last week, I think it was Friday, and so the Covent Gardens incident, which involved a lot of Rastas, Rasta brutality. There was a lot of tensions between the Rastas. This is in Jamaica, by the way. There's a lot of tensions and brutalities tensions between the Rastas and the authorities in Jamaica and the police, and Rasta brutality. They were beaten. Rastas were actually beaten. At the time, you had Alexander Bustamante, who was the Prime Minister of Jamaica. He actually led Jamaica into its independence in 1962. But this is back in 1960. This is back in 1963, which is a year after independence. The Covent Garden incidents took place, and it was not a nice thing. There's even elders who are alive now who was around at the time. They were youngsters at the time when the Covent Garden incident took place, and they cry tears, you know, when they tell their stories about how the Rastas were victimized and you know, brutally beaten and even killed. There was a lot of Rastas who actually lost their lives because they wore their locks, and because they smoked their herb and so on, because they opposed colonial rule, because Jamaica at the time, and even before independence and post-independence, still followed the colonial, still told the colonial line, because Jamaica, of course, was colonized by the British. You know, it's one of the Commonwealth countries where the Queen still owns. You know, and the Queen goes there a lot. Prince Charles goes there a lot. You might have seen pictures and videos and recordings of Prince Charles going into Jamaica, meeting with people like Rita Marley and the respected prime ministers of the time, and so on. And so it's one of those Commonwealth countries, but they still follow colonial rule, and even after independence, they still do it. But the Rastas were contrary, because the Rastas believed in, of course, the rising of Emperor Haile Selassie I, the Emperor of Ethiopia. Was born as Ras Makanan Tafari, and hence why they carry the name Rastafari, because they really were, some call them cults, but they were deep believers in the principles of Haile Selassie I, Rastafari. After his crowning on the crown in Addis Ababa in November of 1930, alongside Empress Menin, his wife, and their children. And there's many pictures doing the rounds, and it's all out there in books, on the internet. I posted some pictures up myself and gave my comments and give my synopsis about events as they took place and so on, from my standpoint, and also factual standpoints from how it happened at that time. But the Rastas, those early Rastas, went through a lot of things. There was even a thing where the Prime Minister, Alexander Bustamante, ordered these troops to bring them in one by one, dead or alive. So even if the Rasta man had died or was dead, he still had to be brought in, you know, to the offices and stuff, dead or alive. And what they used to do, they used to brutally torture Rastas by pulling their locks, holding them by their locks and pulling them, you know. So holding their locks, and you know, like when you hold something, yeah, like this cloth here, yeah, you hold a cloth and you pull it. They used to do that to Rastas here. So inhuman. And Rastas were beaten, they were whipped, as I said, they were murdered, they were killed, they were attacked. If they were just standing doing nothing, just going about their way, and the policeman or members of the authority saw them, they'll be whipped. They'll be, as I said, they'll be pulled, like Rastaman ordered. They'll be pulled and they'll be brought in. And it lasted for a couple of months, between April, I think it was between April the 11th of April the 11th of 1963, and it went all the way to March. Now April, May, June. It went all the way to June the 13th of the same year. So it was what? It was 2 months, just over 2 months. So April the 11th, 1963 to June the 13th, 1963. But there were tensions before that, because the tensions started in the late 50s between the Rastas and the authorities, because the Rastas, as I said, there was always a bigger tension. The Rastas were like, they opposed European rule and colonial rule. They believed in the Back to Africa movement, and people like Mortimer Plano, who was the first Rasta teacher on the island of Jamaica, would go around the island and talk about, the coming, or the crowning of Haile Selassie I on the throne of Ethiopia, because it's written in the scriptures that look to the kings coming out of the east, which is Africa, really. And so Marcus Garvey also touched upon this, because the Rastas revere Marcus Garvey as much as they revere Haile Selassie I, because Marcus Garvey prophesied about this. This is about maybe 10 years before the crowning of Haile Selassie I in 1930. Marcus Garvey was prophesied about the coming of a king from Africa, which was Haile Selassie, from about the 1920s. And so when this manifested itself in 1930, and then when Leonard Percival Howell came on the scene, Martin Plano was a teacher, but he came afterwards. But the original teacher of Rastafari was Leonard Percival Howell, and he went around the island talking about the significance of Selassie, what it meant for black people, and so on. And this is what we got the Rastas. This is what the original Rastas were actually called Rastas. My father was a kid at the time in Jamaica, and he told me that they were named Jujus. They used to call him the Juju man, and they used to live outdoors. They never lived inside any houses. They ate natural foods from the trees and from the ground, and nothing was processed, and so on. And it was a natural lifestyle. As the Rastas would say, it was a natural liberty. And so, because of their, some would say, their unconventional ways, they were despised. They were opposed and despised. Also by members of the public, members of society scorned them. So if you're walking down the road and you saw a Rasta man coming, you cross over, you turn and go in another direction. You want to touch him because there was like a stigma attached to them. They were dirty, but the Rastas were very clean, because they always used to go to the sea and bathe. My father told me this. He said they used to go to the sea and bathe, and their clothes were always clean. And as I said, they never ate meat or nothing. It was always vegetation from the ground, natural foods. There were farmers and so on and so forth. They knew how to cultivate land, and they were peaceful people. They used to smoke the herb, but the herb was natural, coming from herb was like Bob Marley said, it's a plant, So they were smoking what they call idle. It wasn't no cigarette or tobacco. It was natural. So everything they did was natural, and they were living in a natural liberty, as they say in the Rasta talk. Liberty, we mean life, natural liberty. And so the authorities hated this, and so the authorities under Bustamante's rulership brutalized them. It came to a head as I said, in June of 1963, when a truce was scored. But even after then, Rastas were still being victimized, still being tortured. Sometimes the police would have them under tight scrutiny. And even when the movement spread and it came to England after the Windrush generation, some of the members of the Windrush generation were Rastas themselves, or the children then became Rastas. It became very popular. It became a thing in the 1970s. And of course, fused with reggae music, roots reggae music, with Bob Marley, Burning Spear, Peter Tosh, Dennis Brown, Gregory Isaacs, and all of these guys, and other people, Ras Michael. And it became a solid movement for the black youths of that era, of the 1970s and into the 1980s. So if you're a youngster, if you're a teenager or youngster in the 1970s, 80s, the chances are you got a doses of that Rastafari movement, of the music, of the talk, of the reasonings, and so on, and smoking a herb. Because even my mother is from that generation, and she remembers it. She was part of it, and so you couldn't escape it, because it was there. It was our culture, you see, and we all knew about that. And even generations now, even if they never got the doses of it for the peak years of the 70s and 80s, they still have it now, because it's out there, it's on YouTube, you know, their parents were involved in it, or their grandparents were involved in it, so it gets filtered down to generations, you see. And so it's very, very important to think about that, and to always, I'm looking over there because the window's open and it's really bright, and the sun is around there, and I'm just looking out. I'm still focused, don't worry. They've got a nice space, very nice space here. So as I was saying before, so they got doses of all that, and it really was something. And you see now, as you see, the Rastafari movement is worldwide. You've got other races of people adopting to Rastafari, you know, taking up to Rastafari. White people, Asian people, Chinese who don't like us, they don't like us, but they're still taking because the Bob Marley phenomenon, peace and love, the music, the reggae music, the smoke of the herb, and some of them have caught on, and some of them have adapted, and the ones, I suppose, the ones who've adapted to Rastafari do like us. I can't say they all hate us, because it's wrong to say they all hate us, even though we know a lot of them hate us. Probably majority of them hate us, we know that, but I do believe the ones that have converted to Rastafari from other races, I think there's a love there, or certainly respect there for us. Even if they don't love us too much, there's a respect there. So I'll give them that, but it's still our thing. It's still our way of life, our philosophy, our culture, our existence, our liberty, whatever you want to call it. So yes, that's the Coral Gardens movement, you know, happened in Kingston. And as I said, under Bustamante, it was a really brutal time for Rastas. When Michael Manley took over and became in power, or came into power, I can't talk today, came into power in 1972 after he won the election. You know, Michael Manley was the opposition to Bustamante. You know, because the People National, the PNP, the PNP was Michael Manley's government, which his father was a part of. His father actually founded it, Norman Rashid Manley, in the 1930s sometime there. And then you had the leader of the opposition, which is Alexander Bustamante, who was the Prime Minister of Jamaica when independence came in '62. And so Michael Manley took over the mantle from his father in 1972. Well, I think there might have been someone else there, but he came into power in 1972. Then he embraced Rastafari, Michael Manley. A lot of Rastas were singing about the PNP's victories. Election victories, because him and Bob Marley were close. As you saw that picture there with the two leaders, the leader of opposition at the time, 1978, when they almost killed Bob Marley and he had to go in exile and he had to come over to England, and Bob Marley went back and tried to unite the two major political parties, with Michael Manley and Edward Seaga, and he got Edward Seaga that side and Michael Manley that side, and he was in the middle, and he got them two of them to hold hands together like that, and he's in the middle. Because as Bob Marley said, he doesn't really dabble in politics. He's not into politics. He said, I'm not dabbling in politics. And so Rastafari, they're not into politics neither. They're just into living and natural liberty. So it's very, very, it's not surprising, but it's very, very strange and ironic how they always seem to, the respected political leaders, prime ministers, maybe now it's a lot different now because Rastafari is more commercial now. It's everywhere. Everybody wants to be a Rastafari, and because of Bob Marley, the most famous Rasta man ever, Jamaica is making millions a year because of tourist attraction. Some people only come to Jamaica to see Bob Marley's museum, or to visit Bob Marley's museum, or to see his statue, or just to visit where he was living and stuff, to find out more about him, you know. But there's other Rastas like Burning Spear who sing reggae music, and others, Muta Baruka, who is one of the greatest Rasta philosophers out there. And I must talk about Plano, because Mortimer Plano was another teacher of the Rastafari. When Leonard Arrow kind of went down because he was getting old, Mortimer Plano kind of took up the mantle and was talking to a lot of the young up-and-coming reggae singers, reggae music. Some of them got the dosage already from Arrow's teaching before in the 30s, 40s and 50s. But Plano came around in the 50s going into the 60s as a young man. Then he took up the mantle to teach the Rastas about Rasta philosophy, the Back to Africa movement, because Plano was one of the first Rasta man to go to Africa. As it started in Jamaica really, and it spread forth now. So there's Rastas in virtually every continent. And so Plano went to Africa to promote the Rasta movement. Yeah, he did, and to also promote Marcus Garvey's Back to Africa movement, because Marcus Garvey was really a great advocate for going back to the motherland. Even though he never went there himself, he had, I think the UNIA had an office in Ghana, but he wasn't able to reach there because he died too. He died early. He died only 52. I do believe he was going to go there eventually if he had lived longer, which he should have. But he died because he died very suddenly. He never got the chance to go out there and to explore and to bring his principles, his philosophies out there. But Plano did this in the 60s. He went out there and he promoted Marcus Garvey. He promoted the Rasta movement, and he talked about where it's coming from, where it is now, where it's heading, and some of the other philosophies, some of the plans and ideas in place that the Rastas were talking about. But this is another thing again, a lot of people don't believe that Rastafari has a philosophy. They don't believe they have a headquarters, but Rastafari are very organised. They've got divisions. They've got the Baba Shanti region, they've got the 12 tribes of Israel division. Of course, they've just got the Nyabingi as well division. They've got many divisions. 12 tribes, Nyabingi, Bobo, and so on. I do believe that Bob Marley is part of the 12 tribes, Dennis Brown as well, because they believe a lot in Yeshua, Jesus Christ, Yeshua Christ. And so there you have it. So it's come a long way from the brutality of Rastas. Yeah, as my father said, they were called originally Jujus. Bunny Wailer has an album called The Black Heart Man, another great Rastafari. Bunny Wailer talks about them in that album Black Heart Man, and that song especially talks about the dread that the Rasta man carried at that time. Because if you saw a man with long hair and beard and moustache and beard coming right down, like almost looking like those Kemetic deities, like Osiris of Kemet, Egypt, where their long beards coming down, son of divinity. When the Rasta man has that, and has all that beard and hair and long locks, and when he's walking towards you, and as a youngster, you're gonna run because who's this? He looks very unconventional, very different, and you're gonna run a mile from him. And Bunny Wailer, he done an interview some years ago, and he speaks about this, and he says that when he was a youngster, he said, the Rastaman, a lot of the children used to run away because they were scared of him. But after a while, you got used to him. You got to find out that actually this man has a good heart, has a heart of gold. He's not going to harm you. He's harmless. And so they stayed around, and then they got to realize that this Rastaman was a beautiful, this black, it's called Black Heart Man. Some of them were called Black Heart Man as well. Jojo Man, Black Heart Man, and the Rastafari. They got other names as well. High priest and so on. That's another word I've heard to describe the Rasta man. High priest and so on. Bonga Man's another one. Jimmy Cliff has a great tune out there from years ago. It was in The Harder They Come. Bonga Man, I come. When all you're hearing is drumming and stuff. And that's another word. Naya Man's another one. So Naya Man, Bonga Man, Juju Man, Black Heart Man, High Priest. And there's others. The Rasta man, of course, is the most commercial and most known one, but there's others. You have the Rasta women as well. Let's not forget the women, because there's Rasta women, and one day we must come and talk about the Rasta women as well, and the impact of the Rasta women. We're gonna have to do that one day. And so, brothers and sisters, we're coming to the end now, and we just wanted to highlight that because it was recent, and I heard something on the radio, and some of the elders who was around at the time as youngsters, young men, coming on the radio. It was on I believe on Mellow FM with Ram Shate. And he was interviewing some of the older Rastas, and some came in and was speaking about what they went through, and some were in tears or crying. And even though it happened nearly 60 years ago, it still lives raw in the memory. Some of them remember like it was last week, and they've come a long way, because look at it now. Without the Rasta man, a lot of us will be lost, because they're the ones that first taught us about African spirituality, amongst the first to talk to. Because don't forget, this is just after colonial rule, and before the Rasta man, before Plano, before the crown of Selassie, everybody was doing their normal thing. But you had people like Pokamaya. You had mostly spiritual people like from the Pokamaya church, African spirituality and stuff like that. But those were mostly in the rural areas of Jamaica and some parts of the Caribbean. You had Nanny the Maroons, was one of the first natural heroes of Jamaica, and she came from Ghana, but she's really referred to as a Jamaican, because really she came there and she turned the country upside down, fought the colonial rule, fought the oppressors, fought racism, and so on, and freed a lot of people, for a lot of slaves. Paul Bogle was another one who got hanged in 1865. You know, Paul Bogle fought the colonial rule, colonial masters at their own game, and because of that, he said he'd much rather die than live as a slave. He said, I don't want to live. He doesn't want to live as a slave, but he said he'd much rather die than live as a slave. So you had all of these people, and then you had Garvey. Of course, we all know about Garvey. He came, and then you had people, Nanny I mentioned before, William George Gordon. Even though William George Gordon was mixed race, he looked more white than black, but he was mixed race. And he was another one who fought and got hanged as well. So most of the national heroes died. Most of them got hanged, got lynched, got died, got hanged on trees and stuff. And they preferred to pass away. They preferred to die than to actually live as a slave and follow colonial rule, which has nothing to do with them. And so the Rastaman came off of that branch. When Selassie got crowned, and Plano, then Harold came, then Plano came. Then after that, you had other people like Joe Higgs, who taught the Wailers how to sing consciously. And they had people like Count Ozzy, one of the first Nyabingi drummers, a musician, but he also taught Rastafari concepts, and he incorporated Rastafari concepts into the music of Jamaica in the early days of the 50s and the 60s, you know, and so on and so forth. And so just give you a synopsis. Before I forget, you can hit the subscribe button down below, subscribe to our channel, Christy B. Emotep, send a link, share it, spread the word, share our videos, like them, leave your comments down below, tell us what you think and feel about what we're saying. And yes, we could go some more, we could say more things, but that's just basically it, you see. Goes to show you the nastiness of the Jamaican government at that time. You also had people like Hugh Shearer as well. Let's not forget Hugh Shearer, who was really against people like Dr. Walter Rodney coming into the country, because Dr. Walter Rodney was an educator, and he was a follower of Marcus Garvey, and he was a teacher or a lecturer, and he wanted to come to Jamaica to teach the Jamaicans about Garvey and about black movements and about black progress and black spirituality and all of these things. And he ushered out by Hugh Shearer. A lot of books were banned in Jamaica. A lot of Marcus Garvey books were banned in Jamaica, like Philosophy's Opinions, Race First. A lot of Walter Watney's books were banned, you know, like for Chancellor Williams' books for destruction of black civilization. All of these books were banned in Jamaica, and if you were caught reading them, you would get severely punished. My father used to tell me about these things, and my father's friends would back him up and said, yeah, as young men and young people in Jamaica in the 50s and 60s, we were not allowed to read uplifting books for the black mind and for the black person, because they were under such colonial rule and philosophy that if you're seen to read such books, you were severely punished. You were whipped and beaten and expelled from school and stuff like that. So they went through a lot of things in those days. Even the non-Rastas, if you were just black conscious, you went through a lot of things in those days. So if it wasn't for those guys taking a stand and fighting the establishment at their game, not just the national heroes like Nanny and Bogle and others, and Garvey with his fight, but the Rastas who stood to their principle, never conformed. The locks were getting trimmed as well, as I mentioned. I don't know if I mentioned it before, but Alexander Bustamante ordered his troops and the police to trim their hair off, cut their locks off and all that and so on, and get them trimmed. Some of them trimmed the whole locks off, or just some of the locks. They went through a lot. As I said, Rasta brutality at the hands of the police and at the hands of the Jamaica government. It was brutal at that time. It really was brutal. So anyway, brothers and sisters, love you lots. You take care. As I said, subscribe to our channel, Christy B. Emotep, share it, leave your comments below, and tell us what you think. Peace out. Blessed love. Stay safe.